a worse product because the people, your audience's context is completely biased towards 24 frames per second. Make sense? So to keep that in mind, how do you do a good remaster? So understand the context. So for example, let's take the example of film noir. So I have this project right here that I'm working on based on a comic book. And I have this context of different types of artists who's using really interesting colors of paint. And then I have animation that's trying to like be contrasting, kind of like this, gary colors and things like that. And then I started taking a look at film noir. So let's see if I can find some frames about film noir. So film noir is an element of black and white, high contrast films, just like Hitchcock, I guess you could say. Films very typical of the 50s. And what characterizes film noir is very high contrast compared to typical Hollywood, which is very low contrast, very well lit scenes. But with film noir, you have very dark, rainy cities, very angular perspectives. The cameras are always in a Dutch angle or different. They use lots of sharp diagonals and things like that to kind of frame and shape characters inside their shots. So film noir is absolutely beautiful. And in my opinion, I think it's really nice. But it only works in black and white. If you flip this out and you use film noir with something artistic, I guess you could say, it kind of like immediately you destroyed the concept. So to me, I'm like, okay, so how do I work this? Like film noir, you have very strong blacks and whites, but like something like cyberpunk, there's so much contrast, black, light, and dark. It's everywhere, right? You're not guiding the eye anywhere. You're just kind of like filling the space up with neon lights and things like that. There are lights everywhere. And so there's no play with shadow. There's no work with perspective and things like that. So to remaster, you need to understand if I want to like recreate film noir used contrast and shadows and angles and perspective and low cameras and things like that to recreate the story, to show the edginess of how people feel, to show to focus on the violence or the corruption or the moral dilemmas inside the story of that particular context. They used this high contrast and the city and the rain and the night and all of that to show there's one single light source, for example, no fill light at all, just bounce light, to tell their story, their context of the story. So you got to think about that. Like, context is everything. Context is king. And to make a good remaster, you need context. And to do that, you need to understand the context of the medium, which is your frame rate, the cameras, the lenses, the film grain, the aberration, the colors, the everything. And you need to understand the context of the story, the writing, the image, the audience that they were targeting at that particular time. So if I want to remaster a film noir to be 4K and 60 frames per second for a market that's younger, that's based on millennials whose their context is completely different, with like the concept of minorities and green energy and different types of self-expression and freedom instead of the context of film noir, then I would have to rewrite everything and be more creative. If I am too faithful to the original context concerning story, then my remaster of film noir will not work for this generation's context. So when it comes to remastering, I expect more creativity and a changed context using the elements that we have here. For example, a grimy city. So when you think of recontextualized film noir, you go back to Batman and Goth City or the Joker. The Joker is a film noir film in color, in 4K, with the same angles, same grittiness, but it's no longer black and white, and it's completely different. But the context works because with the same contextual foundation as film noir from the 50s, but it was published over the past 5 years or so for a context that really hits home. Mental health, concepts of like contradiction in television, things like that, or Blade Runner exactly. So Blade Runner 2049, I think they did an excellent job compared to the original Blade Runner. And some elements of Star Wars is doing the similar concept, but I think they're kind of botching it because their context is sometimes it hits and sometimes it misses. And it's missing more often than it's hitting because the context is, well, family. So your parents want to watch something that they're familiar with, but your kids want to see something that's new. Their context is different. So they have a very hard market to balance with, which means those who have really enjoyed Star Wars when they were kids will be crying sacrilege. Meanwhile, kids might enjoy the new series without a problem. So it's kind of like that. A good remaster requires a very heavy contextual analysis of story and medium before you start to recreate